Sweet. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Glad you could all make it. We've got, let's see. So we've got two presentations, some tips, and maybe a question at the end from Rich. So that'll be good. I've been a C++ user in Emacs for like about as long as I've been using Emacs, and it's really been a challenge. So I'm glad we could have something themed after this, and I hope everybody can take something away from it. But just the big picture stuff about our meetup real quick. We have two venues going on now for evening presentations like this, which are a little bit longer and we sometimes record. Here at Pure Storage and at Noisebridge in San Francisco, we have roughly, semi-monthly? Is it semi-monthly when it happens twice a month, or is it bi-monthly? I want to say it's semi-monthly.
Semi is twice a month, yeah.
Semi-monthly. Okay, we have semi-monthly coffees in Oakland and San Francisco. There's someone who wants to revive the Walnut Creek one, which happened like 3 times. And if anyone knows of, I always have to ask, if anyone has a venue that they can offer, do let me know. We're doing all right now. Future topics. Sean Farley's coming back. Actually, we had to cancel the one. He was going to do one on Python here in Mountain View, and was canceled due to weather. He gave it at Noisebridge in San Francisco. Instead, he's going to come back and do a different topic 2 weeks from today, right here. So I think it's like MU4E and a few other things like that. Anyway, he has some of his favorite things. We're looking for topics, and we're looking for speakers. So please let me know if you have either of those things. Some people have been talking about an Emacs conference again. There was one in 2015. This comes up every so often, and at some point there'll be a critical mass. We'll actually have one. Now the discussion is maybe Toronto in the summer, although it may be too late to arrange that, but maybe next year. So anyone who's interested in that should let me know, and I'll try to get you on the right mailing list. So for this meetup, we have a GitHub repo, which we put meetup notes, which put our meeting notes in .org format as often as I remember to do it. And we have some videos of indifferent quality, which we've been putting up. You know, the ones actually recorded at Pure Storage are excellent, but the other ones are show the experience level of the people taking the recordings, which is often me. But check it out. There's some good stuff there. I think particularly John Wigley's one on Majit was really well received. Anyway, so I just want to say thanks very much, Gaurav and Pure Storage. Do you want to say anything about Pure Storage? It's a great employer. Yeah.
Oh, that should be obvious.
Okay. Obviously. All right, well, I guess we can just go ahead and get started. If it's okay with everyone, I'll just launch right into my lightning talk, which is... let's see, I can move
Or you can just minimize that.
Yeah, minimize it.
How do I do it? This?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I just move it up to the corner somewhere. Okay, very good. I'll just get started then if I'm audible and everything. I wanted to do IDE support. That's too generic a term. I wanted to do a talk about the structure of how the IDE features work in Emacs. Because I've been struggling, like probably a lot of you all have, trying to figure out, there's all these people who are like, oh, this is how you do C++ in Emacs. It's like, there's like a whole blob of stuff to stick in your init.el, and it's like, don't know what it is, and it's like a package from here and a package from there, and they all together form this giant sort of messy ball of features that are supposed to together create an IDE for you. And I've been kind of going through that for the last 2 or 3 years, trying to tease out the important parts. So I think I've started to understand a little bit more what's going on. And so now what I want to do is try to, for my lightning talk, go at it from the bottom up and say okay, well, how do IDEs work in Emacs anyway? And how in particular do people end up implementing C++ stuff? So let's see. Let's begin at the beginning. One thing that's always struck me is that Emacs is designed as a Lisp editor, and they're not really hiding it very well. like all the like navigation commands, if you look at what's actually happening, like when you type control meta F, it's like forward S expression. Like who knows what an S expression is, right? I mean, okay. Well, everyone in this room apparently, but I don't know, it's like, to me, it's sort of non-obvious. So there's a legacy of Lisp editing going on here. The other thing is, I think every single person who's out there writing a programming mode is writing it in Emacs Lisp, so it's on the brain, right, the whole time. So like a lot of the IDE features are like built from the fact that Emacs is designed as a Lisp IDE. And so like you have to kind of always keep that in mind when you're looking at it. Let's see, so I think I want to start by looking at some Emacs Lisp code and seeing what IDE features there are for that. The two features I'm going to focus on to sort of motivate all of this are two popular IDE features, jump to definition and symbol completion. Symbol completion is like you just type a little bit of something and it fills out the rest for you, or it gives you an option. So it's like, or if you want to, I mean, if you just have like a list of possible symbols, you want to know what all they are and like how to sort of narrow down a few of them. And the other one is just sort of starting at some point. I'll jump to definition and also jump to references, like get all the references of a symbol that's at point or something like that. And these things are not natural to get if you're a C++ programmer in Emacs. And so I'm going to show like the ways they've been kind of implemented and how that all works. All right. So I was about to launch into messing around with Emacs Lisp. And so what I've done is I've pulled up Emacs and this window just says plain. I have a very, very small amount of, like there's hardly any initialization here at all. I ran it with -q and a custom initialization file. So almost nothing has been done to this. So I'm just going to show what it looks like in Emacs Lisp to try to use some of these features. So all I've done is I've defined just one. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah. I've defined just one function here with this defun. And let's see. The first thing I think I want to show you is let me see, because this is just kind of funny to see. Mark defun. There's this function mark defun, which puts the and then you can just kind of delete it. So it marks a region consisting of the function that you're in. And let's look at something in C++. And mark defun. It's not a defun, but it worked. Right. And also sort of control meta forward S expression, that works, just like it does in Lisp, just to prove that that's what I'm doing. Forward S expression, yeah. And it works in C++. So that's the legacy of Lisp here in our editor, in our favorite editor. So here I've defined this function, and maybe I want to go and find its definition. Oh, no definitions found. And the reason is that I'm editing this file, but I haven't actually loaded it into Emacs. And Emacs figures out where things are because basically it's already loaded the code, so it knows for each function where it got it from. So that's not going to work until we load it. And similarly, let me go try completing something like a function name. Let's see. And control meta I. Okay, well, okay. So we have a lot of Emacs Lisp functions that start with B. But if we go down here, none of these appear to be bar. The only one is barf if buffer read only, I guess, so we can do that. So when we want to use, so how does it figure out when we want to jump to definition? How does it figure out where to go? Well, let me see. So let's get the there we go. Xref find definition. So I type meta dot here, and that's like the normal key binding for jump to definition. So if you look down here, it's going to have an explanation. Does it explain about the backends? It doesn't. So this is the normal interface that Emacs has for jumping to a definition. And it's going to use something called, let me get this variable, xref backend functions. So it's going to use this thing, xref backend functions, and this is the main mechanism that it's going to use during jump to definition. So any provider that's able to help Emacs identify the location of things can register something by adding it to this xref backend functions list. And currently it's using something called etags xref backend. That doesn't seem right, but I guess that works. So let's go and actually load this file now. So it'll be able to find it. Okay, so now we've loaded the thing that we're editing, and now we ought to be able to, boom, jump to definition. I should have turned on the thing that shows you what I'm typing. Sorry about that, folks. And now let's see if we're able to also complete. So, and completion is control meta I. And again, there's a lot of stuff starting with B. And this is the built-in Emacs completion right here. So, and it's complete but not unique because there's also barf or whatever in addition to bar. But let's go down and make sure it's in there. Yeah, you can see it's now in Emacs's completion list. So that's kind of how it works in Emacs Lisp, which is the, oh, and there's a feature you can see now in the lower left hand. There's a feature called LDoc as well, which just gives you the signature. And again, I think that feature is always called LDoc, which I assume stands for Emacs Lisp document, even if you're using some other language. So it's always goes back to Emacs Lisp. Okay, so let's look at a C++ file. Okay, now what happens if we go down here and we try to jump to the definition of bar? Oh, it says I have to visit a tags table. I don't know why that is. Well, perhaps it's because, see here, xref backend functions. Okay, it's set to the same thing. That's interesting. Emacs Lisp didn't have any problem with it, even though it was also set to etags xref backend. Well, whatever. And similarly, if we start, we can't get completion here either. I assume control meta. Yeah. So I'm doing control meta I, and there's no completion, and meta dot is not jumping me to anything. So let's go give it a tags file. You all know probably this is the old school way of. We should have a tags file now. Yep. This is the old school way to get symbol information into Emacs. Let's go back here and take a look at this again. All right, now go down here. Let's see. Can I jump to definition? Boom! I can jump to definition. And can I complete? Looks like I can. And this is the old school Emacs style completion now working. Did I show you all? I don't think I showed you completion at point functions. This is the other thing that it's going to use. This for completion. Completion at point functions. So that's the kind of the Emacs hook that brings in completion by default for you. So any package or whatever that can supply completion information can go and modify that variable to register its ability. Okay, let's go back to here. All right, so C++, even in the plain version, needs some help, external help, which is tags. It really doesn't scale to regenerate that tags file all the time. So that's one of the reasons that all these other things exist. All right, let's go to the next demo. So I'm going to introduce company at this point, so you can start to see one of the fancy packages in use. Company is a really powerful thing and does a lot of stuff. but I'm going to force it into a mode where it has to use the tag file we just generated. So you can see, you can compare the plain Emacs versus basically having the same stuff available, but the company code being used. So that's going to look like this. Okay, so we're now in, we can jump to definition. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, because I haven't loaded it. Yep. All right. And we can jump to definition just like we did before. That's interesting. I guess I saved it. Okay, well, it went to the right place. Let's go have a look at, oh, no, let's do completion now. You can see we're in company mode. Oh, yes, right. Okay, sorry, y'all. What's happening is I'm editing the same file in multiple live Emacs's, so. Sorry about that. Okay, that should be, do I want to press SQ or P? Steal, I want to steal. Okay, great. All right, now, so let's see if we can do completion now. Completion, oh, there we go. Now we have company doing its thing. So this is just the same as it was before, but with like as little as possible setup to get company working. So you can see, I've got some choices here. It pops up a little thing right there. It's already looking a lot more modern. So there's bar. Yay, okay, we got bar. And you can see down here on the bottom that I'm in company mode. Let's do the same thing for food.cpp.
So are you just comparing Lisp to C++?
Yeah, so the reason it's interesting to me is that the Emacs started as a Lisp editing environment. And so, yeah, I think these things are, it's interesting to see how the features in C++ work and how on the Emacs Lisp work.
Saying C++ is based off of Lisp?
No, the
Emacs features.
Yes, right.
Oh, the Emacs features.
Yeah,
Oh,
because the entire like sort of what do you call that? The
mindset.
Mindset. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
What was that, Ben?
The Emacs Lisp infrastructure.
Yeah, and the mindset are all like sort of Lisp oriented, and so like when you want to understand what Emacs is doing, it helps to go back to Lisp. Yeah. Okay. So let's here we are. We're in company mode. I didn't load any tags, but if you look at
You extend Emacs using Lisp, right?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
XREF backend functions. Oh, geez, it still says. Oh, I know why, because I've got it company complete. Let's look at a different variable. Let's look at company backends. Okay, so now company backends is. Why don't I see this? It's shown below. Wow, that's a really long. Company E tags. Okay, great. So the current value is company E tags. So I forced company into a mode where it's using that tag file we generated before. So we're just like a little step up off of plain Emacs now. But it's still going to work. We can jump to definition. Oh, wow, that's interesting. It wants me to, okay. Actually, let me see what that's bound to. Oh, it's bound to XREF fine definitions. That's interesting. Okay, I'm not sure I have actually company doing this one. Oh, right, because company is a completion.
Right.
Okay, never mind. All right, so let's just complete. Let's complete this with company. Control meta I. There. So those are our choices now. The things that were in the tag files. And let's see if we try to use something out of the standard library. No completion found, right? So company right now just has one backend, and it's the tag file that we already generated. So now I have a different one to show you. And let's see, so there's company. And the next one is we're going to add a new backend to company. So you can see what that looks like. Here's company with the Clang backend. And as before, let me see if we can complete here. As before, we can complete, and it looks like it has the signatures now, which is interesting. But The other cool thing is now when I do this, I get, I think, a lot more choices. Because now it's using Clang, which is looking at all the IO stream stuff, and
Like the Clang library.
this is the Clang. Actually, I'm not sure what company's using in this case, but I assume it's ClangD, which is like a server that's giving symbol information about this file. So as it's sort of half compiled it.
So here, what's the company backend's variable?
Let's have a look.
And does it reference? Does it dereference includes?
Yeah, it's looking into that include there. Let's see, so let's get back up here. That's the previous value. Yeah, so the current value is what I set in the init file, so I added one more back in.
So I bet the reason, so when you did BA
Yeah.
CLI, I think the reason it said bar and then bar with signature, it might be because you have two backends there.
Yeah, it's getting them from both.
So eTags gives you bar and then Clang gives you bar int.
Really?
Yeah, so
I thought they have a thing, so that like normally has a really long list of backends actually, and I thought that it had this thing where it's sort of like it's like an event processor where the first one can say I'm going to take this one and the rest don't. Maybe. Let's find out. I want to look at that because there's a bar and a baz here. Was there multiple bars?
yeah, no,
That's
so
not
again,
good.
yeah, type BA
Okay.
and then CLI.
Why am I?
You know what I think it is?
Just BA.
Is it?
It says, see how it says value company, tax company Clang?
Yeah.
There's two layers there. There's two.
Yeah.
It's only going to use the last form in company backends, but that last form is a list of two. I bet if you had value, just one list, company eTags, company Clang, then it would do what you're saying. It only uses the
That's a good question. So if you look at the whole thing, so to be honest, as a plain list instead of a nested list like that, it didn't work. I had some
really?
weird error and I was like, I don't understand this.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
just-
okay.
But you can also see that it does, that nested list has a significant meaning of some sort, and my eyes crossed while I was reading the man page, and I was like, okay, whatever. But you can see the old value as well. It's got that same kind of thing going on, and has something to do with priorities and how they all work together and stuff. And I just don't know what it is. And now I can't duplicate this thing where we saw the multiple things for bar. I'm just getting bar and baz now.
I mean, is
I
the
didn't
buffer,
dream it, did I?
Is the buffer
Oh,
truncating
yeah.
it?
Good question. Let's see. Doesn't seem to be.
So like
Hmm.
compared to Emacs and NetBeans, how good is it at tracking symbols across files?
NetBeans. I don't know NetBeans.
Oh, I mainly use NetBeans
Okay.
for symbols.
Anyone know
So
about
that I haven't been able to figure out how to get anything set up to reference large projects. Like if I have a project that's like 3 or 4 gigabytes of source code, I'm trying to dig through like, all this mangled code where like, people have overloaded operators and they've redefined constructs and stuff. And NetBeans usually gives up.
Yeah.
It doesn't ever actually make it to where it's supposed to go. And the other issue I've had is it tries to load in all the symbol information during the project initialization. And sometimes it just fails because it runs out of memory.
Right.
So
Well, there are tools. So the company is kind of like I'm using it as an instructive example. There's much more like complicated things out there like RTags and CCLS that claim to have some very, like one of the reasons for existing is to try to make indexing fast and efficient, and that's a design focus for them. I haven't actually used them. I would like to. Anyone? CCLS or C-Scope, C-Query?
I've used C-Scope.
Yeah.
C-Scope works fine.
I've used C-Scope. It works for small projects, but it doesn't seem to work for anything big. Or at least I don't know how to use it right. I just run C tags on the file and then I get the symbol table and or the symbols and then but I mean I'm like looking like, I have one file which had using a function which was defined in 5 files to the left, and I'm getting a compiler error because the compiler can't see it because there's a cyclic includes somewhere. And so I'm basically trying to rely on the the symbol, the IDE to help tell me where it is that I'm actually going. But I don't, yeah.
I read some stuff months ago on who was using a ClangD backend. We were talking specifically like dealing with like Chromium source code, which is huge. I think they're using ClangD and then LSP to it to do that, which is
That's what I use most of the time, actually. That's my personal configuration, but I just assume because people talk about our tags and stuff being like so much smarter about caching and recalculating tags and stuff, I just assumed they were better. I don't know.
it's an impression I get.
So ClangD's all right then, that's good.
I used to use R tags, but I switched to ClangD and LSP.
No kidding. What was your reason for changing, Ben?
C++ is getting too complicated for anything except Clang to figure out. That's pretty much it.
But our tags actually uses Clang under the covers, right?
Oh yeah, I think it probably does.
I thought it was like Clang. I thought it was our tags is basically libclang plus some database scheme or something. I don't know. Well, thanks for that. All right, so where was I? Yeah, so okay, I've just demonstrated the Clang backend. I think that's clear enough. Save, no, don't save, yes, quit anyway. Okay, and then finally I wanted to add a company front end. The whole thrust I'm trying to get at here is that these things are built out of like layers of stuff, and so I hope that's kind of what I wanted to contribute with this lightning talk. So the last thing I'm going to add is a company front end here. Interestingly, company actually has this idea of a front end, and company Helm or whatever the package is called is not actually one of those. But do you know something about it? No, okay. Anyway, so you can change the way the user interface works for you and switch out that top level thing. And so I'm just going to demonstrate that real quick. Here's a company with a Helm front end. I think it does not have, let's see, okay, complete. There we go, so there's Helm, if y'all are familiar with Helm. I don't think I actually did, and this is maddening, I have to figure it out. I have to figure out how to stop company from trying to complete after I quit out of Helm. Anyway, so that's a setting I haven't figured out yet, but it just gives you an idea. You can swap out the front end, you can swap out the back end, and all of these IDE things are made out of just kind of like layers of this stuff. And then this is my attempt at making kind of a picture of the whole thing, and I hope it's clear. I was going to figure out how to highlight the different components and talk about how different tools implement different parts of this stack, but I ran out of time. So somebody talk about TixEd and how I can do this better. Anyway, so this whole stack here, starting all the way at the bottom, Clang is a C++ code base, and you can actually access a lot of the sort of semantic analysis stuff at the C++ level, and I actually prefer to do it there. It's something called libtooling. But a lot of people like libclang because it has a stable API. And I think in particular rtags is using libclang. But from what I could tell, CCLS is actually using the C++ layer directly, and they tout that as an advantage on their GitHub, because that's sort of like more, if you're willing to accept a little turbulence in the API, you can sometimes get more information from the C++ layer. And then most of these things out there then put a server on top of it, so they write some kind of binary using libclang or C++ clang directly. And then they've got some kind of protocol that they're talking to some kind of Emacs backend. And interestingly, although LSP is a standard, I think it's recent enough that there's a bunch of stuff that's still out there. Like, they won't ever use uCompleteMe, YCMD. That was actually designed for VI, I believe. So they actually have their own, I think it's Clang based, but then they've got their own protocol I think the same is true for irony and maybe for R tags. I'm not sure about R tags. Do you know, Ben?
I don't know offhand. I think you might be right. RTags has a custom protocol, maybe.
Protocol, yeah. But CCLS and of course ClangD is actually supplied by the LLVM project, and that is an LSP server. So it uses that protocol. CCLS isn't ClangD, but it also uses LSP, but it, I guess, wanted to do things a little bit differently. So CCLS is structurally a lot like Clang, or ClangD rather. I talked about irony. And then above that, you have whatever kind of Emacs code that sits on top of all of that and provides additional features, and there's tons of features out there. I'm just focusing on two, obviously, UI stuff. And finally, your selection framework of which like Helm would be an example. I don't know how many, there's a lot of IV users and stuff like that, but you tend to build a stack that's kind of like this when you're assembling your C++ IDE situation.
Yeah, what do you usually use it for?
You mean like the IDE?
No, the
features
Clang.
Or Clang?
Yeah.
Well, it powers a lot of stuff. I guess it ends up doing a lot of like symbol lookups and finding references to things and stuff like that. Definitions and references. And I don't know. I have to look at the LSP protocol and see all the things that it supports. There's other stuff like fixits, I think, is that what they're called? There's a thing in the LSP protocol where the compiler can say, I think you're missing a semicolon here or something like that, and you can just be like, do it, and it just inserts it, or whatever kind of like simple fixes are out there.
Yeah,
Stuff
no,
like that.
I've done that with Java in NetBeans.
Okay.
So that's why I started using NetBeans, is because Java has all that right in. And then, but it also had a C++ interface, but it doesn't do any of it. So, and then I never was able to figure out, like I've heard people using BI and Emacs, but I didn't realize you could do all the same things.
Yeah, hopefully so.
Because it's not that strongly typed. C++. Well, I guess for most of the Lin stuff, it wouldn't make a difference. It's just whenever I get an error message in C++, I guess it's better now. It usually like gives me a list about this long for anything in the standard library.
Right, yeah.
And so
expansions.
it doesn't know what allocator you're using. It doesn't know. I mean, it doesn't seem to know what it's doing very well.
Huh.
Like in Java, when you get an error message, it's like you forgot a comma or you forgot a semicolon. It seems like whenever I get an error message in C++, it's you actually have an error on line 10, but really the error was on line 2. But because I didn't catch it on line 2, I'm saying it's on line 10.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
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 It doesn't have a good way of really figuring out what it is that you're trying to do when you wrote the.
You might be interested in concepts, which is a new feature coming into the language, which is going to help library writers more easily explain the requirements of using their class. Because it tends to be like somebody's supplying the wrong kind of type, and the way it comes out is like it's a type that can't be incremented or something, and you're trying to increment it somewhere way down, and then it ends up with this explosion because it can't at the point where you supplied the type. It doesn't know how yet. It doesn't know how to be like, oh, I need a type that can be incremented or something. And it just ends up being this sort of like, oh, I tried to increment this thing way down here and everything failed.
Well, it sounds like Clang can do a lot of it already, from what you're saying.
I don't
don't
think
think so?
it can help with that problem. It does have better error messages though.
Okay.
If you haven't used it, I would definitely try it.
Well, I noticed that the Clang compiler has better error messages.
Yeah. All right, wait, does anyone have any questions about any of that? This is pretty much it for me. Yeah, okay, well. You want to go next, Ben?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. It was very instructive.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks.
so
All right, let me get my screen sorted. Maybe I can share. Where's Zoom gone? Okay, is that? I probably need to blow up things a bit. Can everyone see? Is this good? Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Some C++? All right, great. We've got some notes. So, you know, I've been programming C++ for a little over 20 years and Emacs for about 8 to 9. I switched around 2010 from Visual Studio. I used to use Emacs on Cygwin in some unholy alliance of Cygwin and Windows and Emacs at work. Now I use Linux at work, but I'm confined to terminal Emacs, which is interesting in its own way. So I guess I just wanted to build on what Jeff said. So you can see here I've got a C++ file. This is actually a unit test for like a maze. I'm using modern CPP font lock, which is providing the syntax highlighting. Although I'm sort of wondering whether syntax highlighting is going to get complicated enough that we need to use LSP to provide it at some point. Because I don't know about all of you, but you can see that it's doing mostly okay. But if I start putting in things like raw string literals, sometimes it can get confused. It does a pretty good job though. I use, as you can see, well, you might not be able to see because it's kind of small, but so I'm using fly check. I'm using LSP with ClangD and fly check, clang check. And I found that, I don't know if this is true of the very latest ClangD, but I think the version of ClangD I'm using is somewhere around Clang 7, 7 point something, 701 probably. And it claims to not, like when LSP interrogates it to find out what things it can do, it says, yes, I can provide you with jump to definition. But I found the ClangD I was using said, no, I can't do find references. So I can do method dot on this, and it will jump to definition, or I can do method dot on that, and it will, sorry about the size, and it will jump to there. But if I do, I have references bound to meta question mark. I had to actually override in my Emacs config and tell, because ClangD can provide references, as you can see here, but according to LSP, when it interrogates it, it says it can't. So I force overrode that. So that was kind of interesting. Other than that, I have probably all the stuff you can read about online. I'm using Company LSP. Is it Company or Company? I don't know. But anyway, Company LSP and Company C headers. And I have the fixits. So as you can see there, the fly check is saying expected semicolon. And if I hit meta return, I can apply that fixit. So I just have a few things like that bound. As you can see, all these pop-ups are like LSP telling me where things are defined. If you haven't seen that before, that's LSP UI in combination with LSP mode. So that's kind of like the stuff you find online for C++. I also have a few things of my own. One thing I've got is, well, I found it online and I kind of extended it, and it does auto includes. So anything you use from the standard library here, I've got vector, I've got sort. So vectors in vector, obviously, sorts in algorithms, std beginner, std ender in iterator. And I think further down this file, I have some strings and other things. So if I hit Control-C-I, which I have bound, it will automatically give me all the standard includes that I need for this. And the code that does that is basically, I found someone had written this somewhere around about C++ 98, maybe bits of 11. It was by this person called Siohei Yoshida. I don't know who that is, but I found it on GitHub. It seemed to be abandoned, and it's basically a really long list of regexes with their corresponding headers. So, for example,
Wow.
you know, if you use accumulate or in a product or partial sum, etc., it knows they live in numeric. And I wrote, as you see, this is a big list. I keep this up to date. Sometimes it's about up to date with C++ 17. And I just wrote a few helper functions to manipulate the headers in the header block that it finds for the standard headers. So if I take this out and do it again, you'll see that it got rid of sort and it got rid of algorithm and iterator because they're not used anymore. So I find that really useful. That's just a quality of life thing that I use all the time.
I came across something called like company header include or like company, I don't know, something like, I came across something like that today. Have you ever heard of any company kind of thing that does that feature?
There's company C headers.
That's it.
So if, as you can see, I'm sort of trying to type exclude algorithm, and I don't know why it gave me out.
But it won't automatically figure it out.
Right, it won't figure it out by looking at the file.
It'll just complete it. Okay.
And there's include what you use, which is sort of along those lines. In general, it's going to be very difficult to look at a file in an arbitrary code base and figure out which includes it needs just from within the code base. But I thought I could do a good job of the targeted set of the standard includes at least, and that since that's mostly what I want to pull in automatically, it works for me.
Nice.
There's a few things it doesn't deal with, like if it can't deal with user-defined literals defined in the standard, for example, but it does a pretty good job. I also have the usual quality of life things like clang format on save. Something I found recently, actually I don't know if any of you follow the Reddit on Emacs, the Emacs Red subreddit, but they started doing a weekly tips and tricks thread. And a couple of weeks ago, someone posted a useful thing which I had used for recently, which is transposing arguments in an argument list. So normally Emacs has built in, like transpose words is on meta t. So if I hit meta t there, you'll see it flips around 2 words. But transposing arguments, I have it bound to control meta t. So if I hit that there, it's going to flip around the arguments for that function call, which is sometimes useful. And I found it, let's see. So yeah, whoever posted it on Reddit had written these few functions, and the kind of top level wrapper functions are C transpose odds forward and C transpose odds backwards. I just wrote a wrapper function with a prefix command, and I altered the argument separator regular expression to deal with either arguments in template arguments or function arguments or sort of aggregate constructor arguments. And so that's a quality of life thing that I use in C++. Let's see what else. Some of you might use CMake, so I just wanted to mention that. So CMake font lock is useful, as you can see it syntax highlights CMake, so I don't know if people use that in general. I use another package, actually it's a bit of eLisp that I hacked up myself based on the clang format driver, except this is, I found there's a Python, you can pip install this thing called CMake format, and it's a lot less complicated than clang format. But based on the clang format driver, I I just ripped out some bits, cut it down, and made a CMake format driver, and hooked it up, of course, to onsave. Now you can see it doesn't do a great job because it's kind of elided all these comment lines. But you know, if I start messing with my formatting here, and I save, hopefully it just reformats it.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, these are kind of quality of life things that I use all the time. Well, that's okay. Other quality of life stuff I have. I use a package. Does anyone else use comment dwim too? Like dwim, do what I mean. So it just lets you comment and uncomment whole blocks. I don't know if there's built-in stuff for that. Probably there is, but it's not. And it's not C++ specific because it like infers the comment character from the file type.
Right.
So it's the same whatever you're using.
Yeah, that exists as a standard command. It's just called comment region.
Right.
MetaX comment region, and that will just.
So if I were to do, if I did MetaX comment region.
Use the third one, comment or uncomment region.
Well, you just did it.
Comment or
Uncomment region. Oh, okay. That's what
Okay.
it toggles it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, maybe I need to, this one switches between, oh, I thought it did more cycling than that. It like cycles comments to the end of the line, and
Oh
I probably need to relook at how I'm using that one. Another thing I found recently was string inflection. Anyone heard of that one?
No.
It basically cycles case types.
Oh,
So you can see like it's doing all kinds of. So that's useful if you're working in a foreign code base, or if you want to, you know, just you accidentally type the wrong way. That helps me sometimes. And another thing I ran across recently is called rotate text, and this is one where I'll show you that it's basically a little package that provides for. I don't know if you can see this too well. So you can make various groups of things, and it will rotate between them when the point's on. For example, true and false. You know, you just have a press to change true to false and back again. And you can set them up, as you can see, in groups. So I have one set up for north, south, east, west. So it just sort of rotates through, which is sometimes handy. Something actually it's not showing up here, but something I'm sort of wondering if there's a better solution for is the fill column indicator. Anyone use fill column indicator? I'm not sure why it's not showing up here, actually. But normally, oh, there, you can see, where was it? So for some reason, it's not showing up in this mode too well, but you can see under my flashing cursor there. And if I were in, I think, terminal mode, it draws vertical bars at column 80. But this doesn't play very well. As you can see, it's kind of pushing the tooltip way off to the right. That expected unqualified, because this isn't a comment. That's telling me there's an error, but it's pushed way off to the right. So I haven't found a good solution for a fill column indicator yet. Anyone have any suggestions?
Abandon your 18 character limit.
Abandon the 80 character limit? Well,
I have something. Sorry, go ahead.
I could abandon it, but Clang format's just gonna re-up it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I have something that my Windows resize to 80. So I could have like 5 windows side by side, but then if I, select the second one, it widens out to 80 and all the other ones collapse to the right. So every time I select a different window in my frame, so my fill column indicator is the edge of my window. That's
Right.
that's how I do it. But
Yeah, I normally use 100 column width of the window with a 80 column indicator.
Right.
And I was wondering, you probably have more stuff here, and I don't want to
I'm about
redirect
at the
you.
end. I'm about at the end of my stuff actually.
I was going to ask if you were going to be so kind as to tell us about the thing you did for the Boost library, the special
Oh, sure.
minor mode or whatever. Just want to make sure you get to that.
So,
No rush.
okay, sure. Let's see. I have it here somewhere. Yeah, so what Jeff is referring to, so let me open up a sort of a testing. So if you haven't seen this before, this is basically a DSL in C++ for doing state machines. And it's, sorry, I had to get my rabbit away from the wires because he's, so this is a little DSL in C++ for doing state machines, and it's Boost SML. It's not a real Boost library, but it's called Boost SML. And you can see the kind of format of it is we have a state here, an event, and then an action, and then a possible transition to another state. And this thing in square brackets is called a guard. So if an event happens and this guard is true, then it will do the action or transition state. So I took a job where I was using a lot of these things, and as you can imagine, when you're changing, the changing length of the string, and these are all getting out of alignment. These are all getting out of alignment, and it's just a pain to keep them all in alignment. So I wrote a few functions that would align them, and I have it bound to. Oh yes, bound to. What do I have it bound to? Control square bracket, and of course now it's not working for some reason. I don't know why it's not working. And Jeff, actually, you did a little presentation of it in the middle of one of these meetups a few months ago.
Yeah, I was just like, I just brought it up. You weren't there, but I don't think, but I was like, I brought up the idea of it because one of the things that strikes me about it is that it was kind of like, I was wondering if there was a better implementation technique. Not that there's anything wrong with this, but it's like the sort of idiom or design pattern where it's like a bunch of regexes. And I remember I brought this up and everyone around the table was like, no, that's pretty much what you have to do, just a bunch of regexes. Like, okay.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know I was going to be demoing this, or I probably would have checked to make sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But why doesn't it work? I don't know.
You can just tell us what it normally does.
Anyway,
Sorry.
what it normally does is, as you can see, it's driven by a bunch of different calls to the basic built-in call is a line regexp. Right, so this is what happens kind of at the bottom of the bottom of the call tree, and so when I call find the line boost SML, it looks for this boost SML table start, which is set to make transition table. Oh, you know what? I think probably it doesn't work because of that. There we go.
hey,
Because I didn't have the right syntax. So it finds the start, it tries to find the start of a table, and then having found that, it sort of goes through each line of the table and calls all of these different alignments to sort of first of all try and line up the, up to the plus, and then up to, I think, open square bracket for the guards, and then sort of up to the slash for the actions, and then finally up to the equals. And I spent a while kind of crafting all the different behavior I wanted in here. And there are a few customization points that I hooked up. So I can control it to, some people like to line all the actions beyond all the guards, or have spaces inside their guards, sort of thing. So there's a few ways to tweak it. But other than that, it's pretty much, it does exactly what I just showed you. So, if I were to make a new type here and realign, it works. If I were to make this guard massively longer, everything gets aligned nicely.
Nice.
So when I was doing a lot of work with this particular DSL, it was really, really useful. And I have to say, it's the envy of all the Vim users in the office.
I would love to see people who make libraries that have DSLs like this in them actually release like editor modes for them as well. That seems like it ought to be a part of the project,
Yeah,
But
I mean,
people may not want to do it for Emacs.
I was inspired by org mode and its handling of tables, because again, one of the things that we use at work is Gherkin, which is a behavior-driven development testing framework. And you sort of, it looks a lot like org mode, because you define your test cases and the variables that go into your test cases by putting them in essentially org mode tables. And there's a feature mode for Emacs that built on top of org mode to deal with this. And so obviously org mode can deal with tables and like reflowing and reformatting all the column widths just automatically as you use it. And so that's what inspired me to do the same thing here for this little DSL.
Does it follow the same approach with the align, what is it? Something align, something.
Align regexp.
Align regexp.
I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
I haven't looked at that part of the org mode source.
All right.
Org mode is a lot more capable than my hacked up regex is, I'm sure. That's about all I have. One question I had actually was, does anyone use Emacs for debugging? Does anyone use GDB in Emacs or LLDB, Jeff, or anyone else?
Yeah, I do.
Because I don't really have that. I don't have that stuff integrated.
Yeah, I've kind of started doing it. It was a little painful at first. I still get I have problems when all the windows start getting wonky. Like after a while, I use that one that's got like the 6 windows. I forget what that is, which is like super awesome. But then it tends to decay after a while after I start like visiting files and stuff, and like suddenly all the stuff is in some different place. And I think at one of these meetings somebody told me there's a special command that just restores everything.
Yes, yeah.
What is it, Cat?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
And look up. It's easy because it gives you a thing because it kind of it abuses your frames and then.
Like,
So you're a user,
winner,
but
like winner undo or something?
Oh, no, but it's not winner, but I've heard of winner.
Well, there's like restore window configuration. You can put your window configuration in a register if you want, and then jump back to it, and all your windows go
I've
back.
heard of this.
Yeah. So
Well, Ken, why don't you describe your experience with GDB?
It sounds like you have longer GDB sessions than I do. So I tend to find my stuff pretty quick.
Basically, that was for saying that you just write more bugs.
Yes, I believe it. Well, yeah, I've been trying to. It's sort of. I think that was the one thing that made C Lion. I still pay for a C Lion license every year. It's like just sometimes the debugging experience needs to be like really nice, And but I haven't touched it in a while.
If you don't want to do it in Emacs, there's a really nice Python based mode for if you're doing like GDB in the terminal. I'm trying to remember what it's called. You need to be using more modern versions of GDB, but I'm kind of stuck on
Sounds cool.
RHL 7, so I remember what it's called. I can look it up.
Do you have a specific struggle, Ben, or you just haven't used it much?
Well, for GDB,
Yeah.
I sort of it's one of those things where I half set it up in my config, but I really don't use it enough to have got used to it and worked out all the bits. Most of the development I do is test driven. A lot of it is compile time stuff, and a lot of it doesn't. I almost never use a debugger.
That's right. I remember the whole argument on Twitter. Like the people who don't sort of look down on debugger usage, and the people who are like, it's all about the debugger. I do everything in the debugger, and a little controversy there. You wrote a really nice. Was it a blog post?
Yeah.
Ben jumped into the middle because it was kind of like the game people versus the non-game people, and
right. And I used to be a game person.
Yeah.
For a long time until this year or last year. So I've sort of been on both sides of the fence. And the job I work at now is very different. Very, game C++ is more like C++ early 2000s era. Still quite a bit of object orientation, a lot of distrust of C++ 11 and beyond features. And the kind of work I do now is cutting edge C++, almost 20.
cool. Wow. Has anyone used the DAB? I think there's this thing called, it's a debugger.
DAP?
DAB?
DAP?
Maybe it's DAP.
I haven't used it either, but
Heard about this. It's like a new kind of interface to debuggers.
I think it does. I think it ties into LSP mode or something.
Yeah, that's right. It has something to do with LSP, but I forget. I'll have to experiment with that sometime.
I'm one of those people who swears by debuggers.
Yeah.
Python and Go, and I just write it, and then I hate, like all my coworkers, they just print debug, and then they just have to rerun the whole thing every time they need to change something about the print statements. And
Right.
I sort of dream of like, if everything I did could be like running a reverse debugger, and I could step through and step back. But
Yeah.
it's hard to get it all working properly.
You tried the checkpoints? They work pretty well for you?
No, I don't know what that is. Is this for C++?
Yeah, GDB a while back allowed you to checkpoint the program.
Okay.
So you could actually
restore
like-
to the previous state or something.
Yeah, so you couldn't go backwards, but you could jump backwards to a state right before you were.
Oh, okay, nice.
So it was like the next best thing.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
There is a commercial software called UndoDB,
Hmm.
which allows you to pretty efficiently step backwards
Yeah,
up your program. Have you ever, if you looked at that one?
nope.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
That is pretty cool, yes.
They do fundamentally checkpoint, but it's,
In a
sort of
smart way.
a different approach
In
than
a
the
very
GDB
smart
one.
way,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, GDB is dumb, so to
Yeah.
speak.
It's still better than a lot of the kind of print debugging I see some of my
Yeah.
coworkers doing. It looks so tedious, like the kind of stuff they have to do.
You cannot really use debuggers with multi-threaded programming.
With what?
Multi-threaded programming or multi-process programming.
Oh, because
it
like,
wouldn't work.
well, like in Go, I do some Golang, for example, and it has Go routines that are like baked into it, and they're not, system threads or system processes. But you can very easily switch between different ones and see what their current state is when they put things on channels and pass through. It's more complicated, but like the language was designed for it to be kind of debuggable. I think if it starts to use system threads or other processes, then it becomes like just a non-starter, but
Just like that you could execute functions in real time. So you'd have
Right,
dead
yeah.
functions in there that don't do anything, but you could still run them in the debugger, and that's
Yeah.
really useful.
call them live on the spot, yeah.
Yeah.
So DAP looks interesting. I just looked it up. Debug Adapter Protocol, is that the one?
Yeah, that sounds right.
It looks like an up and coming project. I looked a bit at Real Good as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's sort of the for a while it was supposed to be the better version of good, the Grand Unified Debugger
Oh yeah.
based in Emacs.
Sounds like an Emacs thing.
We may have to experiment with DAP then, with the LSP connections.
Yeah.
I do have an issue that I talked to you about a while back, Jeff, which is, and I don't know really if this affects many people, but if you write a lot of header-only C++, virtually all of the integration with things like ClangD and everything that uses LSP relies on having a compile commands database that CMake can output, right?
Yeah.
And that's great, but it's very translation unit oriented, because a compilation database by definition only tells you about which object files get compiled, therefore which CPP files. And if most of your work is in header files, you know, some of the projects I work on have one translation unit and everything's in headers apart from just the one CPP, which is the test driver.
Yeah.
And so if you're just sort of jumping around between header files, it's very difficult for, you know, whatever's on the back end to make sense of what it is you're doing, because you know, you don't have a CPP file loaded. It doesn't know about a CPP file necessarily when you're working in this header-only library. And that, I think, is that's sort of an existential problem with all of these approaches that I haven't really found a good answer to yet.
I was hoping that one of these indexing things might be smart about that in some way. What way, I don't know. Yeah. All right, well, have we exhausted you for now then?
That's pretty much all I have
All right.
on my side.
Thank you so much. That was excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Why not?
Oh, awesome. All right.
Dirk, you want to go now?
Sure.
Let me just share.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are just like six pages on there. You can forward them.
Okay, let's see.
I am very impressed by all of you guys who can fully customize your Emacs over there. You know, my work, I typically jump on many different machines, and I typically just have a basic, you know, Emacs that you get with your, you know, with your Linux distribution. So, you know, I have to rely on just the built-in features for most of the stuff. I just looked at my Emacs file and just, I don't know, put some stuff on there that I'm using every day. You know, maybe you know some or maybe you don't. So I don't know, let's see what I have on the next slide there. Okay, yeah, so one thing I do is I use this mode lines feature because, you know, many people write different files. They may all have different rules for indenting, you know, using tabs, using spaces and whatever. And so there is, you know, basically you can put some special comments at the start of your file, and then Emacs and even VI will parse them. And you can basically just customize your Emacs for that buffer with all kinds of stuff.
So the line at the top of the file, you're calling that the mode line?
Yes, that is called the mode line.
Not to be confused with the mode line at the bottom of the...
Oh, yeah.
Right,
Okay,
yeah, no, exactly, yes. So, and I mean, you can put in any kind of customizations and variable settings in there. So there is this URL there from the Wireshark project, which has a little web page where you can interactively configure stuff, where you can say my basic indentation is this, and I want to have spaces or tabs or so forth. And then depending on what you put in the form, you know, the web page will print you those magic lines. If we go to the next slide, you know, that kind of shows you what those mode lines will look like. So that you can put them on your files. And that is, I find that very helpful because, you know, again, my project has, you know, indentation rules like all over the place. And then, of course, you know, I can just figure it out once. I put this on those files, and then, you know, my Emacs will just behave properly to whatever the file already has. And then again, for the VI users, it will automatically like fix it for them. So again, that's just one tip I have, you know, I kind of use fairly often. Okay, let's see the next one.
I had a question about
Yes, okay.
Do people also use like, is editor config files, is that provide the same sort of thing that those mode line things do? Does anyone use editor config?
I've used editor config on the team where, you know, I was the only Emacs user and everyone else used different editors. And that was fairly useful.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay. And then once again, of course, this can work for any other language as well. Right.
I think the editor config one, you don't need like, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but you don't need like some stuff that's like for your Emacs. This is what the indent is, and for VI, it's the same. It's just like in a different form. I think editor config, they all have it's one universal thing, and then the different editors know how to parse that. So
it's very much like having a Clang format file at the root of your project. You'd put an editor config file at the root of your project.
Oh, that's cool. Oh. I use directory local, dir locals files sometimes for things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just two things, you know, from my .emacs file that I've used over the years. You know, one is, but then again, you know, sometimes the Emacs versions I'm using are fairly old. So I found this quite interesting to just add some custom keywords, you know, to just include in syntax highlighting. So over there, I had the override and no except just as some new C++ keywords that once again older versions of Emacs and their, you know, CC mode might not use.
well, that's all you need to do, huh? Get them highlighted. That's all you have to do to get them highlighted as a keyword.
Yeah, something like that.
I always assumed it was more complicated.
No, so I mean, yes, as you see, they have a hook where you can tell them some additional keywords, and then that, you know, that was very useful to me. And then another one down there is, so I'd like to start my compile out of my editor, then if you put this thing in and your Emacs will actually parse a compile error, he will at least automatically jump there, which is quite nice because I can just see the output go, or also stop. So, you know, otherwise it might just mouse through, and then, you know, while he compiles 1,000 other files, I can already try to fix the first one he's doing. Yeah, okay, so, and then, okay, here are some just, you know, basically I just like to use my function keys for stuff. So for me, you know, F9 starts compile, and that will, you know, then that would run make for me, which builds my code. And Control F9 will kill the compilation window if I already know, like, there's no point. You know, like, you have an error in your header, okay, it doesn't make sense for your compiler to try to compile 1,000 additional files and complain about the same error all the time. And then again, F10, I've bound to next error, you know, which would just, you know, go to the next error that he might parse. After he automatically found the first one for me, you know, I can press F10, go to the next one. Okay, and then, you know, I know our remote presenter mentioned the FlyMake, and we showed FlyMake mode in a blink of an eye. So I don't know if anybody here knows what it is or is using that. This would be like my third topic, which I just put in there.
I think Ben and I are both flight check users, right?
That seems to be a modern replacement.
Yeah.
Once again, FlyMake, you know, you find built in, and then flight check would be something you need to install.
It sounds like FlyMake got a big rebuild or was refactored recently because people were starting to really prefer flight check.
I don't know. Okay, so if you go to the next, okay, let's look at the next slide.
Does everybody know what flight check and FlyMake are? By
Just to be clear,
yeah, why don't you explain?
FlyMake is the built-in one?
Yes, FlyMake is the built-in one. And I just want to, I'm explaining what it's doing here on the remaining ones.
Oh, yeah.
Right, okay, so there's FlyMake mode. The idea is that while you edit your current C++ source code buffer, you know, Emacs will automatically save it to a temporary file on the hard disk. And then he will call your make file with a special target. We're going to see it in the next slide. He will parse any output that your compiler might produce for warning and error messages. And then he will, you know, kind of syntax highlight those lines or also with the error message for you in your current buffer. So it's a little bit like, automatically syntax or compile checking the buffer you're working in, which is quite useful. And in order to make this, go to the next one. In order to make this work, basically what you need if you use standard make files, you need to add this special target check-syntax. And then, Emacs will give you the source file he wants you to check in the environment variable chkey_sources. And then, for example, if you use GNU or I think clang, you would give it, the command line argument syntax only, which means that, he just parses it, checks for the syntax, but doesn't want to produce an object file and so forth.
We often have this kind of argument in the C++ world about compile times, because it's kind of like, there's some people like, me, who are like, oh, compile times don't matter that much. Like, what really matters is the compiled performance, and it's,
Sure.
This seems like an area that I've run into personally recently, where it's like, okay, I can kind of see the viewpoint of the other people on the other side, because fly check's unusable if the compile is too slow, if there's just like so many templates to be instantiated or whatever.
Yeah, but the question is how fast do you need it to react? So I'm typing on my file for several minutes typically. Yeah. So if this thing takes 10 seconds of an iteration, to compile, that's fast enough for me to find any syntax errors, before I might be ready to save and do a real compile and run.
You want to say something, Ben? You're familiar with this controversy.
I was just going to say that, so when I demoed, I specifically had a CPP file, but this, and so flycheck was working pretty well. But this is something that really falls down if you're working in the header-only library, because of course there is source to compile it. It's that accidental problem I mentioned earlier. But it's a good thing.
Yeah. But I think you are a little of a. If you build header file only libraries, you're not quite the common C++ developer. So.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I found, today, and I hope gives you guys some new ideas.
Thank you. The presentation. All right, let's give him a round of applause. And then if I'm correct, no one else has a presentation, right? But we do have a question. We do have a question from Rich, and then maybe we have other people with questions too. That's all the presentations?